Okay, I think we're going to be starting now. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Once again, just to reiterate, you can leave your questions at the chat box at the side and we can get to them at the end of today's session. I hope you're enjoying your break from classes this activities week. Today's session will delve into key insights behind growing your own fashion business, the challenges, caveats, and newfound potentials of doing it post-pandemic. My name is Rebekah, and I'm an LCF alumni, having recently graduated from Fashion Design and Development. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking to Claudia Poh, founder of design studio Werable, an adaptive-focused fashion brand based in Singapore, an alumnus of Parsons and winner of Vogue Singapore's Innovation Prize. Claudia is passionate about designing functional pieces for everyone, regardless of their mobility or dexterity, and will be sharing her experience and advice for students looking to find out more about adaptive fashion or building your own brand. For those of us who are not familiar with the inception of Werable, could you please share a little about what got you interested in creating adaptive fashion pieces and how it led to starting up your own business?
Hi, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. To introduce myself, my name is Claudia, and I'm a fashion designer. And I started Werable late 2019. And how this came about, it was honestly just because of the people that I'm surrounded by. At the core of everything I do, it's about creating something that could genuinely impact the lives of those around me, be it whether I work with them or live with them. And this began even before I moved back to Singapore when I was based in the US. I had taken a class and I was introduced to a friend, a mutual friend, who was diagnosed with ALS, rendering both her arms paralyzed. And ever since then, I really couldn't quite revert back to the way I was designing it. I would always pick things up and question the user experience, how we interact with items. And in essence, we develop and create easy to wear clothing for people with disabilities and aging. Yeah. I think you're muted.
Thank you so much for sharing with us more about how you started your brand. My next question would be, Wearables designs are not just for people with mobility issues, and as you mentioned, you advocate for style and function to not be mutually exclusive. With that in mind, as a ready-to-wear designer, what inspires your collections and what does your design process look like?
It's a very strange design process. I start off the whole collection having no idea what it's gonna look like. I always like to speak of it as like you're laying the scaffolding up, the concrete, and then you essentially build it up layer by layer. And what really lays the foundation for everything I do is as simple as a conversation. So with adaptive fashion, it's against our interest if we start making assumptions about the lived experiences of others. So I always started off with a conversation. So before I even start designing anything, just getting a better understanding of the challenges people might be experiencing. Sometimes I don't even seek these conversations. They happen casually over like a cup of ice cream or a cup of coffee. And a really cool example would be someone just coming to me and saying that, they didn't like the appearance of an arm sling, and how every single time they would bump into an old friend, everyone would just be like, what happened to your arm? They don't want to go into this really emotional conversation about how they had yet another stroke. And we realize there's a great opportunity for fashion to not only transform the ease of wearing, but also the quality of their life and how they want to be seen by the rest of the world. Yeah. So from there, I would start draping. I would buy or take one of the old arm slings, cut it up. One of the best ways to prototype really is with pre-existing pieces and samples and just hacking them. Yeah.
Yes, I think this is a process that a lot of design students are quite familiar with, taking apart vintage pieces that you find, or just deconstructing garments so that you can really find out how it's made and then adapt it and see how you can come up with new designs as well. I think also it's quite interesting that you mentioned just having a conversation, and today the topic of this video interview is called In Conversation with Claudia. So maybe today people will have a spark of new ideas by listening to what we discuss. Also, I remember that previously when we were having separate conversations, that you have done sampling processes with stroke patients, and there was one case with a pair of twin sisters. Maybe you could talk about that process, because I found it really interesting how it was as simple as asking questions and doing fitting sessions to her convenience, obviously, as because she was going through physiotherapy as well.
Thank you so much for remembering, and also to share a bit more about what Rebekah just spoke about. I collaborated with a nonprofit here in Singapore, Stroke Support Station, and everything we've been doing has been on a grassroots level, meaning occupational therapists, social workers. I would essentially be in touch with them, or they would just write me an email connecting me with their patients. And in this scenario, one of the patients was a pair of twin sisters, and one of the sisters essentially had a stroke on the left side of her body. And stroke being something that first 60 days is very critical, but it progressively gets better. What happened there was that we were creating a product and ideating a product that would grow and improve and recover with her. So initially, it would start off with actually the main user is not the person who experienced a stroke, but in fact her sister. And we'll think about, okay, as a caregiver, how do you interact with clothes? How do you dress someone else? But slowly this had to be something that's transitioned into being an item that empowers a greater sense of independence. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think everyone can check that out more on your Instagram page, because there are some pictures, and also you describe a bit about that process. So my next question would be, there is a real demand for clothing to adapt for society's increasing needs. And in the UK, almost 1 in 5 adults have a disability. And there are many other reports and studies that is quite available in the public for the growing need for inclusivity in terms of design. Consumer mindsets are changing, and there is a lot of room for such designs to be more accessible to the public. In your opinion, where does real systemic change lie, with our consumer mentality or with brands and designers like yourself?
I would first say and ask really, how do you define real systemic change? And that's the reason why I personally work with grassroots organizations, because we have a better understanding of what these challenges are. We've got more data, we've got more research, and we get to speak with our users. So the pitfall in brands operating on their own without actually interacting with the consumers is that you end up creating something that people might not actually use or need. So I would say the answer would be both. It would require brands to be very comfortable with getting to know their consumer, with understanding that there is no one-size-fits-all solution out there. And on this journey of making fashion more accessible and inclusive, I think about it as you're taking small steps up a hill, up a mountain. With every single design or particularly a particular group of people, you're including them with different prototypes, with different products. You can't necessarily do so in one big leap and with one single product, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I think you see companies sometimes starting with just one signature product, which is good to increase awareness in the beginning. But I do agree that this co-creation process that you're talking about is really essential in making sure that there is long-lasting change or there's long-lasting success for businesses and for the customers to also be able to return back to the brand and be long-term consumers. So my next question would be, what were some of the unexpected challenges you faced growing the brand, and how did you tackle those issues?
I would say that the very first challenge I came about was that people weren't comfortable with meeting face to face. So how do you gain a better understanding of how they interact with clothes? How do you know if your prototypes are even working to begin with? So what happened was that we would first speak over the phone or over Zoom, and I would mail the clothes to them, and they will hold on to them and wear them over a course of 2 weeks before we have another call. So the general way to go about that challenge was to understand that people might not open up that easily regarding matters such as these, and you need time to grow these relationships. So initially I was very excited, very ready to delve into these challenges, but I understood quickly as humans, not everyone might be going at the same speed. Yeah, so the way to go about that was to just understand and adapt to whatever they're comfortable with. It was very different from my case studies when I was based in New York. They were very comfortable with us watching them change even. But when I moved back home to Singapore, that wasn't the case at all. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there also is a varying comfort between consumers, especially different cultures, as you mentioned. Maybe the Asian community is a bit more conservative in terms about speaking about their personal struggles. A question I have that popped up in mind was, you mentioned that you would mail it to them because some people were not comfortable meeting face to face. Was that not quite time consuming and also a little bit costly in that process? Or was it something that you factored in as a necessary cost?
I factored it in as a necessary cost because I had to create those prototypes anyway. So you're really just paying for postage, and the next most expensive resource is your time. Everything was slowed down, and during that moment, I spent more time building out other aspects and other capabilities within the business and within the brand. Beyond the product and beyond this particular target audience, I started asking myself, where are we positioning the brand? What is the price point? What are some pre-existing case studies within this market, and how did they fare? So like a very good example we've spoken about in our own personal time, right, Rebekah, is the Nike Flyees, the shoe that you can put on without using your hands. It was very fascinating to learn from that case study because they've essentially created a product that could improve, it can improve so many lives, but they've made it exclusive, retailed at 120, essentially resold for 600 over dollars. And it got me to really question, where am I going to be positioning the brand? How am I going to be speaking about my target audience? If I openly talk about how I'm designing for people with disabilities, what happens when you're experiencing certain reduced mobility and dexterity, but you're not fully accepting those circumstances, but your life could genuinely benefit from this product. So while we were sending out prototypes, these were all the other challenges that we're facing. Communication, words, it was really, really hard to find them and to pinpoint something that wouldn't stigmatize this particular market any further. Because I would say 4 years ago, if you Googled adaptive fashion, it has a very different reputation compared to now. And it was almost assumed that if it was functional, you're compromising on the aesthetics and the stylistic value. Yeah, and I would say it's greatly changed because there's so many more designers in this space. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I think that is what your brand is striving to do, which is to balance out style and function and that is amazing. You spoke a little bit about brand positioning. Has your target audience changed from the very beginning when you set out with your business ideas and concept? And in terms of how you plan on marketing it in the now and in the future, just so like students can get a bit of a understanding of how that planning process may change over time.
I'm not fully clear, so the question, could you try rephrasing it?
Oh, sorry. So we were talking about brand positioning.
Yeah.
So has that changed from the beginning when you first started out your business?
Yes, because when I started the business and the brand, I had initially thought I was targeting solely B2C caregivers as well as care receivers who are in their later stage of a stroke per se. So they're already at this stage of recovering from it. They're no longer as dependent on your caregivers. And I quickly realized that a lot of the challenge statements that we're getting weren't consistent because it was progressive. And I realized that it was also hard to convince other stakeholders, other mentors, and also investors that what we're creating is a mass market product. You know, even if I tell them, hey, you know, a quarter of our population here in Singapore is going to be over 65, it's the statistics alone weren't enough for them to buy into the idea that it could be something that everyone would desire. So it was a conversation that was hard to have without visual leads. So how I went about it was, okay, I can't convince you unless I show you, because right now, no matter what I tell you, your understanding is that it won't be considered mass market ready to wear. Yeah, it wouldn't look like La Mer, it wouldn't look like JW Anderson. But then my question to them was, what if one day Yohji Yamamoto came out with an adaptive fashion line? Would you still have the same stigmas associated to it? And I said to them, what if we were that brand that stepped forward and created ready-to-wear pieces, and for once not mass market t-shirts and shorts? Why does adaptive fashion have to be basic everyday wear? Why can't it be sexy? Why can't it be feminine? These are all the questions that were really like keeping me up late at night.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay,
so answer your question. Sorry, yeah, to answer your question, yes.
And it's okay that it has changed, and I think it comes with, you know, a lot of research and understanding, and also in this instance, maybe you could talk a little bit more about the funding behind your business, because there are people involved that you also need to make sure that understands the business KPIs and how you're going to achieve those targets. It can't just be solely based on design and yeah.
So how I went about it initially when I moved back was getting in touch and building communities at local trade associations. So really immersing myself into building the brand's legitimacy and equity. How could I get people to hear our name and trust us that we are the right people to take this forward? So applying to competitions, incubators, and then from there, press followed. So it's beyond the product, as you said, it's also marketing. It's about building the brand's name. And once those numbers roll in, the engagement rolls in, as well as not just on a quantitative matter, qualitative data, who are the people that are actually engaging with you guys through word of mouth, so that these relationships aren't just a number, so that we actually engage with them and build products that they genuinely need. Yeah. So trade associations, competitions, grants, that is how I started. And more than that as well, I don't think I would have been able to embark on this journey if it weren't for reconnecting with past mentors. So Werable is actually part of a bigger holdings company, and a lot of our earlier starts and funding came from that company. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And since we're on the topic of mentorship as well, you just mentioned. So Claudia and I actually met back in Singapore when I was completing my final year remotely, and we were using the same studio space. It was then that we had many conversations about navigating the design industry, importance of mentorship and seeking advice and help from people around you. For example, I myself have found mentors through my course leaders and previous bosses that I've worked for. And I find it really useful to take note of key individuals I admire. It doesn't have to be just fashion, could be anybody from public speaking or just people who are really skilled at business management, and attend talks, interviews, and reach out to them. So for you, Claudia, what is your definition of mentorship, and are you able to advise students on how to seek out a mentor?
Oddly enough, the mentors that I have at present, I didn't chase them with a stick and go, hey, do you want to be my mentor? That was not how it started at all. We just happened to be in the same co-working space. We just happened to really care about the same issues. And because we kept talking about these things, naturally, we just started ideating in a much more regular basis. When I started looking at it, I was like, oh, I guess this person is my mentor. They've been so pivotal in all the advice I've received. We're aligned on many values, and even when we have differences, we can speak to each other in a very healthy way to be able to troubleshoot things. Such as being able to convince them, because they were saying to me in terms of my earlier stages of marketing and my messaging was that with the way you're talking about it, only people with disabilities will buy it. And my question to them was like, what's wrong with that? They're saying, how can you want to go help people if you can't grow it to like say a multi-million-dollar business? The more money you make, the more mass this goes, the more you'll be able to do CSR and help more people along the way. So being able to find mentors like that, you won't find it on their LinkedIn. You won't know just by looking at their LinkedIn. You have to have these conversations. You must have disagreements. You must be able to talk them out, and more importantly, to be receptive to what people are saying as well. So it's not just about me convincing other people. I went, okay, you're right in the sense whereby I do want to help these people, but I also need to be mass market. Then I'm like looking at my entire body of work. What am I doing now in terms of how I'm communicating my brand to you that makes you believe that it can't be mass market? Then we go over the deck and she'll circle everything. And I think it's as simple as, if you have a challenge with what you're doing, just start by asking those questions first, just to get their 2 cents before you even ask them to be your mentor. And if you guys have a good working relationship, then consider taking it to the next level. And instead of like chasing people for certain things, I guess first ask yourself what value you can bring them. Yeah.
Yeah, that is really interesting to think of it as how you can also benefit them at the same time. So I guess naturally the next question for me would be, what was the best advice you have received? Doesn't have to be from your mentor, but can just be in general.
I think this advice wasn't directed at me, and it's currently off the top of my head, but you don't need to have secured funding to be able to start on something that you care about. If you care about it, just start on it now. You don't need a lot of money. You don't have to create so many different versions. You don't have to have a whole collection. Start somewhere with like $50 first. Like, it doesn't take that much to start an Instagram account, buy a domain, everything else you can learn and improvise from there. You don't wait to secure like $1 million of funding before you embark on something that you have faith in. Yeah, because if I did that, I guess I wouldn't be here, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think a lot of people tend to hesitate in the beginning and we overthink because we worry that, oh, we need X amount of money in order to be successful, in order for this to be start properly. But like you said, you just need to work really hard, be consistent, make sure that you have a good business idea and speak to people. I think talking to people is very important because it opens up a lot of doors. On the other end of this, I do also understand that sometimes like ideas are your best asset. Do you think that at times it might come to a point where sharing your ideas with people in the initial stage might be a bit dangerous because there might be other people that take on your business ideas? Do you have a stance on this?
Oh, Bex, ideas is not your best asset. That's the easiest part.
Oh, no?
That's the easiest part. You wake up in bed, if only I could create this amazing brand, few $1 million worth. You just think about it, you dream it. I actually quite disagree with. I disagree with you on that. Also, in the past year, the reason why I held off on publishing or even launching was like, but what if someone takes this idea before I patent it, before I even produced it? Should I even be sharing photos with Vogue? Should I even be sharing photos with anyone? Because people were releasing articles about the work even before I had a product ready to sell. And I was like, am I doing the right thing? I'm not ready for these opportunities, but I'm not about to tell people to go away because they bring me more opportunities. They bring more people to my door. They have so many more occupational therapists writing into me, and we're building more products that can help people. So I would say that don't be afraid of sharing your work. Like, put it out there, because that's the only way you know if it's honestly worth your time. Because I like almost every single case study, right, that I and every single garment that I made that was adaptive in New York, I didn't keep any of it. I gave it all away. You make it for someone, you give it to that person, and ultimately you can't always safeguard what people do with those products. If someone buys it and they bring it to China and copy it, what people really can't copy is the system you've designed, the brand that you've cultivated, the community that you've built. Idea is easy, but to get the support of all these people behind it to validate your work, to help you grow it, that's so much harder.
Yeah, definitely. The whole system is very key into making it work. Yeah. Thanks for disagreeing with me just now. I do see your point. I do see your point. No. It's a combination of ideas and action, which makes it work. Yes.
No, and it's not just action. Your action, honestly, is like not specifically yours, but I felt a lot of times that my independent action could only go so far, and if I kept trying to safeguard my work because people were gonna copy it, what a shame! What a shame! That's all I can say, lah. Yeah. You're putting a cap on the potential of your own work when a lot more people can help you improve it. But of course, I don't do it without, like, if you are really worried about the risk involved, have NDAs. Ask questions before you decide if you want to share it with anyone. Also, another thing is that not everyone who you speak to is going to give you valuable comments, and they might have very different opinions than you. Hear them out, but also don't get too conflicted by it, because I remember I was at one point where all my mentors were saying different things. Being somewhat of a crisis. I was like, who do I listen to? But they all sound right. And I think I read this in a book called The Art of Thinking Clearly. You know, you take a 1 by 1 inch piece of paper and you write down the names of the people who you admire and respect, and who live a life that you want for yourself. Maybe those are the people you should listen to.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Perhaps another challenge every emerging fashion brand faces is material sourcing. What most design students learn in their first year or two, apart from garment construction, is the valuable skill to obtain the right textiles or fibers for their design work. I know this part of the critical path has not been the easiest for you, especially without the ability to travel as effectively pre-COVID. What are some of the methods you have sought to engage suitable suppliers or figure out a better strategy to go about this?
So even pre-COVID, I never traveled to search for materials or sourcing or met any factories. Everything was made with these two hands, or with my friends, or with sewing aunties around me. So when I embarked on mass producing some of the pieces that I'm working on right now in my collection, it was honestly quite frightening, because you don't really know what these people look like on the other end. And I realized that if I'm going to relearn and obtain all these contacts from scratch, it's going to take me a very long time. So I started speaking to other brands who also reside in Singapore, and one of them actually proposed to me. They've already sourced all the materials, and they have dead stock. And they said to me that if you let us collaborate with you on this collection, we will sell you the fabrics that've been certified Okotex, it's bamboo, and all the certifications are here, and you can vet them as you like. And I never got that opportunity with sourcing agents based out of China, right? And what happened was that it seemed like a really worthwhile partnership, because you're essentially leveraging on each other's strengths. It's a win-win situation. So working with pre-existing brands has been something quite exciting for me, really. Yeah.
That's great. I think what we can glean from this is to be resourceful and always think about more creative ways to solve such issues, or if you have like minimum order quantity issues. And I would also suggest that for designers to always expose yourself to more materials and more resources. And I know some students this week are going to Premier Vision, and that's a really amazing opportunity to take a look at what is available even before it hits most of the mainstream markets. Yeah, so always go to trade shows and keep lookout for these things online.
Adding on to what Rebekah just shared, right, was that I realized the only way to get transparency of where the yarns and fibers are from is if I had a massive MOQ. But I said to myself, this might be organic cotton, right? But if I'm creating a surplus of products that has not been tested, that there's no guarantee or traction now that people will want or buy this at that scale, aren't I just simply promoting overconsumption? I was like, sustainable fabric, but also not a very sustainable way to do things. So I don't think there's a way to be sustainable 100%, like 100%. There will always be a trade-off that you're making. You just gotta know what. I would rather work with pre-existing brands with a smaller MOQ. And I say smaller, I'm like 100 units per style. There are factories that are able to do that. It's just a lot harder. You've got lesser options, lesser colorways. So what I found quite frustrating is that you have to unfortunately make a compromise in the properties of the fabric. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe sometimes it would be compromised in terms of like the properties, and sometimes it might be that you have lesser colorways, perhaps. Yeah. Something has got to give. Okay, I think this will be the last question I have for you before we're going to the Q&A from the students. So what are you most excited to work on this 2022? What's next for Werable and for you?
So if you go to our website right now, nothing is available for sale, and that's going to change in April. And what I'm also really excited about here is we're finally able to get a bit more face-to-face. We have an exhibition coming up at National Design Center. So if you're in Singapore, please feel free to drop in sometime between the 15th of June and the 15th of July. Sign up for our email subscription if you want to know what our item is that we're going to drop in April. We essentially have 6 looks that we're rolling out. Everything you can put on with one hand. Yes.
Oh, amazing. I'm excited for that. I'm excited for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you everyone for being so patient, and I hope that what we've discussed so far has been very useful for you. Please feel free to pop down in the chat box any questions that you have. Can be directed at Claudia or at myself as well. That's perfectly fine. So the first question that I see here is, how did you manage to price your product without it being too expensive for the public to afford?
So in terms of pricing, I was also asked by certain stakeholders, why are you pricing higher? Why are you pricing so low? And by low, I don't know what this is in pounds, but let's just say a shirt for 150 Singapore dollars lah. How much is that in pounds, Bex?
That is about 75 to 80 pounds. Yeah.
Yeah, so ultimately, I understand that this is also above the price point of what some of my stakeholders and some of my customers can also afford. But at the same time, the reason why the price point is high for them is because we have low MOQs. That's just it. I'm trying to make it as accessible as possible, and for that to be aligned with why we're doing what we're doing to begin with. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, another question I have is, how did you get noticed by Vogue? And I guess a follow-up question that's similar. What is it like receiving editorial support from Vogue Singapore?
Oh, I think I'm very blessed in that front to be able to work with them even before having a product, and it was because they had a competition here in Singapore, and I was the only company that didn't have a product available for sale. But I think what was quite exciting about that was being able to shape and mold the product with them. So it was quite refreshing, I would think, that for once, as a marketing and media team, you get to actually shape the outcome of said products, the experience of how that story is being told. And likewise, I've got their expertise to be able to shape the story. Because bearing in mind that I work alone, I don't just make the quotes, I wash my own cups and make my own coffee. I do material. And so if I can have a fresh pair of eyes ultimately, I went about any means to be able to engage with them, be it competitions, going to co-working spaces that they're at, figuring out what kind of issues that they're going to come out, right? So certain themes like family, certain themes like the body, and it's possible to gain access to their press releases. You just got to write in to get a press kit so you know what's coming up. So when you write your press release and you send it to them, it's in a time where it's most in sync with what they need. Because bear in mind, they're very busy people. And ultimately, what I've mentioned earlier as well, is instead of poking people with a stick to get what you want, ask yourself, how can you be of value to them? How can my content be worth their time today? Or perhaps not today, perhaps in 3 months' time.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And what would you say was the main takeaway from winning the Innovation Prize with Vogue Singapore?
I think it was at a time where I think it was more of an emotional moment in my life, and having won that prize at that particular time, it was a huge source of encouragement to continue doing what I was doing. That, hey, you know, these are all the industry experts, all the panelists that also believe that one day this could be worn by everyone, that we can actually look at this category of clothing, address this need that we are all going to experience, without saying that you have to hide or change the way you speak about disability. I thought that in itself was testament that this entire market was going to grow. And of course, that is the easiest part. Now we've got to put our backs into it to make it happen. So what entailed from the prize was 15,000 Singapore dollars, as well as 2 editorials, 1 print and 1 digital. So in essence, they will be helping us announce our launch. Yeah.
Amazing. And I'm sure that it would get a lot of coverage on the Vogue website as well, which would be great for people overseas to see as well. Yeah, I think that's about it. Oh, we have one last question. No, I think that was it. Yeah, so maybe just ending off, do you have any last words for students, advice for students who are about to graduate or have just graduated and are thinking of starting their own business?
Ooh, advice. While you're still in school, work with your friends. Collaborate. Because once you leave, you have to build that community from scratch again, or work really hard to keep that intact. It's a very good time to co-create, collaborate. And I miss my peers that are in university. I miss working with them. I would say leverage off those contacts while you can. Yeah. Meet as many people as you can now.
Yes.
And work with them, get to know their work ethic. Can you rely on their photography, their visual style? Start building your brand's assets today. Yeah. And your key assets are people, not products. Because products, you need a system that can continually generate bigger and better solutions that can scale.
Mm.
And it's hard to do it alone.
Yes. Thank you so much, Claudia, and thank you everyone who has been with us today. And I hope that this was very useful in terms of giving you a little bit insight into Claudia's experience in adaptive fashion, and also a little bit on tips and tricks on how to navigate a startup. So Claudia, maybe you could pop in your website and your social media links in the chat, and students can actually have a look and connect with you if they have more questions. And I think that's about it for today. Thank you everybody for coming, and I hope you have a lovely week. Can you find it?
I can't type in the chat. I don't have a little button there anymore.
Oh, there's one last question. Okay, maybe I can figure that out for you, and while you think about the question. How do you create your garments to be fashionable but also functional without neglecting either of them?
Oh, such a good question. So with function, don't care about how it looks first. What I've noticed in my process is every time I tweak the aesthetics of it. So one example is a skirt that you can put on with one hand. So if you've got a skirt with a side zipper and you can only use one hand, just take a moment to figure out how you want to put that on. Bit hard, right? So what I essentially had to do was to attach a suspender on it, but it seemed a little tacky. So I was thinking, okay, so what if someone can put this on if that's not something they would want to wear to begin with? So how can I make it more delicate in terms of details, reducing the width, attaching it in a way whereby it looked a bit more like a halter, and then it transitioned into a backless dress. So I'm really excited about that piece right now because essentially you just lop it over your head. You, with that one functional hand, you reach to the back and fasten it to the front. With a magnetic fastener, you can put a dress on with one hand. And for that, it's a fitted dress. You can put any dress on if it's massive and baggy, but that's not necessarily the aesthetic, there we go, that people would desire. So at the end of the day, it's about creating more options and alternatives that aren't available in the market. And it's balancing between the two. Every single time I added a strap or moved something, you can bet that the function behind it was affected somehow. So the problem-solving process was really, it's not linear, it's not function then aesthetic, it's like back and forth until you strike a very fine balance between the two. There are some design details. For example, the coat that I designed for my client in the past with ALS, we had to shorten the back of the coat, right? Right above her hip, and the front of the coat was just above her knees. We had to have the back of the coat short so that she could slip her head through the back of the coat. So some people might think that as an aesthetic feature. No, that was functional. What else was functional? It looked like a kimono because the sleeves were very big. Looks aesthetic, but no, it's because it's very hard to tunnel your hands through the sleeves if the seams, the inseam of the sleeve is open, closed. So we had to open it so it looks like a kimono. A lot of those decisions and a lot of assumptions that people make is that it's an aesthetic decision. But my job was to play off these functions as something that creates a very unique piece. Yeah. Disguise it. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, sounds like a lot of work.
It's very fun though. It's very fun.
Yeah.
You're shaping it as it goes along versus, hey, I make a sketch of this, I have the flat, I know exactly what I need it to look like, and then get frustrated when it doesn't look like your flat. For me, it's more of like, I need to do this particular function. I'm more than happy to shape the appearance because I'm not fixated on a certain outcome. I think that's what I enjoy about the process.
Yeah, so I guess the main takeaway would be also to give yourself time to make several iterations of that design and to not be fixated on the outcome. Yes, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's about it for questions. Oh no, there's one more. Wait, is there one more? Yes, someone asked, how did you find investors? I think you briefly answered this question in the beginning about funding, but
Yes.
maybe a little bit more specifically.
Sure. So when I was 16, I interned here in Singapore at a media company. And since then, every single year, I'll check back in with either my colleagues as well as my boss then. And essentially, they've grown from a media company to a holdings company called Potato Productions. And they essentially all these 17 companies were connected by different social causes. One is a comics book publisher that speaks about issues that perhaps children are not very comfortable, or parents are not very comfortable speaking about to their children. So the comic book actually explores things like period stories, about aging, how do you speak to grandparents with dementia, topics like that. We also have another company that dispatches kits, school in a box, as they call it, to third world countries, areas that have no internet, nor Wi-Fi, no internet, nor electricity, so that they have books, digital books, iPads, and material to learn from. So essentially everyone was just driven by a different social cause. And because I developed into this particular cause at the intersection of fashion and healthcare, I seemed to fit in. So we spoke about how we could start a company together. And I don't know if I would have really gone full speed ahead without their help and their network as well. Yeah. So much, money is one thing, but like I said, you shouldn't hold off on starting the idea just because you don't have the full investment. Come up with your early stage prototypes. You can do that on your own. What investments really help you to do is scale quickly and also to build out a whole team. Yeah.
I would also like to take this chance to highlight that LCF has a great support for graduates and people who are thinking of applying for business grants, if I'm not wrong. I'm not too sure about it, but it's all on the UAL website, and there are a lot of opportunities for you to get the mentorship and help from professionals in school who can help suggest certain funding options for you. So that might be worth checking out. Thank you so much for your time today, Claudia, and thank you everyone for being with us. And I hope that this was really helpful, and thanks for all the questions as well. It was lovely to meet you, and have a great day.
Thank you. Am I still on?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I didn't know. I thought it was over. But yeah, I think perhaps I could mention the website. It's www.werable.co. Feel free to drop us a note there. Or hello.
I put in your Instagram links and your website link in the chat. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so you guys can just reach out there if you have any further questions. But regarding the early steps in terms of investment and all these sort of things, I would say internships and networking events, incubators, these are probably very good places to start at. Depending on which part of the world you're at, then I can give you more specific examples. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
The whole process really started with Claudia and Amy coming over to help me adjust one of my garments by adding straps to them so I could use it to lift my clothes on and off using doorknobs. And from there, it really kind of blossomed into a collection of clothing that has different hacks within the clothing to help me get my clothes on and off. So the more energy I use trying to get dressed, the less energy I have to accomplish other things. So yes, I definitely experienced some strain in the dressing process. The hybrid between the pant skirt is the best for me because it allows for a feminine look, but covering from a modesty standpoint, as my legs are always moving everywhere since I use my feet basically as my hands. My perspective has changed going through this project, knowing that there are sometimes better ways to do things. Why can't we have multiple ways to do it to fit the diverse population, diverse skill sets of everyone? It's just not about my unique challenge. Really exploring using legs of a way of dressing, I think, has large value. The sleeve glove has been very helpful by supporting my hands and shoulders. My shoulders are constantly kind of falling out of their socket, so this holds my hands up, which doesn't allow for the shoulders to subjunct out. It's been helpful and more safe. You need fine motor skills for dressing. Many people lack that, so being able to use your legs as another way of dressing is something that I think is of value for anyone with a disability, especially ones that are in your arms.